following is a public affairs presentation of AM 1220 WQUN. The opinions expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect those of AM 1220 WQUN, its staff, management, or employees, or those of Quinnipiac University.
And good morning and welcome to another edition of Reporter at Large. I'm your host, John DeAndre, and with me this morning is Richard Burgess, president of Connecticut Carry, Incorporated. We'll be doing a number of different programs over the next few months, pro and con on the gun issue. This morning we have Richard from Connecticut Carry, Incorporated. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning.
Let's talk a little bit about your organization first before we talk about the permit process and all of that. Connecticut Carry, Inc.
Connecticut Carry, Inc. was founded to promote the rights of citizens in this state to bear arms. Article 1, Section 15 of the of the Connecticut Constitution, states that every citizen has the right to bear arms in defense of himself and the state. And we try to stay pretty strict to that. Our mentality is that, if we have this right, then we need to guard it pretty well. And part of that is in the legislative process, but part of that is also through the court system and through litigation.
How old is the organization?
Our organization is about a year old right now.
How many members?
We currently have 300.
Is it just Greater New Haven, all of Connecticut?
It's all of Connecticut.
What constitutes the organization in terms of when you get together? Do you go to a shooting range? How is the organization set up?
We are a 501c4 nonprofit, and we do a lot of what we would call activism work, although not very in-your-face activism. We spend a lot of time writing letters to legislators. We spend a lot of time going on media programs such as this. We publish literature to try to educate people. We spend a lot of time trying to correct some of the misconceptions out there about gun laws, about gun rights, about guns and safety in general. We're working with many trainers in the state to try to bring better training and more consistent training throughout Connecticut. So a large part of our emphasis, I would say, is on education.
The state legislature opened this week on Wednesday to a bevy of a number of gun laws in the wake of what happened in Newtown. Are the two connected? With all of these gun laws that are being proposed up in the state legislature this legislative session, in the wake of Newtown, which was a tragedy, nobody is denying that, is it mass hysteria?
I think there is a hysterical portion to this. We have a lot of very reactionary, very nonsensical things being suggested. And, I respect everybody's right to opine about this and to want to have a discussion about this topic. And we are certainly prepared for that discussion. I mean, that's what we're here for. However, there's a certain level of hysteria with regards to the ideas that are being proposed. I mean, we have people proposing things that are already law. For instance, Senator Looney with his prohibition on prohibited people possessing fire or ammunition. We have an issue there where this is already federal law, and he wants to make this a state law. And our state certainly isn't very good at enforcing our laws as it is. So we're seeing a lot of very nonsensical approaches to this. But we also want to try to have a voice in this. As gun owners in Connecticut, we need representation to give some real-world suggestions from people who actually know about guns.
I guess my next follow-up question would be, what would you like to see addressed by Connecticut lawmakers in terms of gun legislation this year?
Right. We have quite a bit of ideas floating around, but we want to make sure that before we present them to people that we are very solid on them. One of the more solid topics that we have that we've been really trying to push this year has been the issue of training. In Connecticut, to get a pistol permit or to get, really any basic training, the NRA basic pistol course, and it's really more a general firearm safety course too, that presents itself as a way to enforce good gun safety and handling practices. And we certainly support that, and it's a great program, and we promote it as much as we can, but we would like to see better training and more training offered. And so with that, we have proposed to the Commissioner of Department of Public Safety that we would like to see our own course presented that goes far beyond the basic requirements that they can use that people can use voluntarily to try to get better training and spend that money when they want to get into the firearms market to get a higher level of training.
Okay, so one issue is better training.
Yes.
What about background checks?
Background checks are, we don't disagree with them in most regards. I think we have good background checks right now. I think there's a lot of misperceptions about this, certainly being floated around. I think one of the leading proponents of increased background checks right now is Mayors Against Illegal Guns, run by Michael Bloomberg out of New York. He likes to promote this gun show loophole as a background check problem. However, every firearm purchased in the state of Connecticut and nationally that goes through it has to go through a federal firearms licensee, and they have to run a background check, and it's run through the federal background check database. Now, if we want to have a discussion about the efficiency of that database or what information is presented in there, we are certainly open to having that conversation. However, there is an issue that they want to present of private sales. And now this is the same thing as you and your friend buying and selling a car to each other in your driveway. If you want to do that with your guns, there's no reason why you shouldn't. The background check in that case is whether you know this person and whether you have a good, reputable person you're dealing with. And the state offers a way to do that by using the pistol permit and calling that into the state and getting an authorization number. And there's a record kept of that. It's called a DPS-3 form. So we believe our background checks, at least in Connecticut, are more than adequate.
What are some of the things that are game changers in terms of you getting a pistol permit or not?
Well, the disqualifications range. I don't have the list of statutes in front of me, but it's mostly felonies. I mean, felonies are a large part of it only because it's an automatic disqualifier for any firearm federally. But there are a few misdemeanors in this state that can also get you. I believe there's reckless endangerment and some domestic charges. There's also some drug possession charges. Those are automatic disqualifiers, but as well in the pistol permit process, there's an issue of suitability in this state, which we tend to be opposed to on the way it's implemented in this state because of the fact that you have to apply with your chief of police to get that, and they do a very vague suitability check on you. And it's in that investigation, it allows for a lot of abuse of the system. Some towns are extremely good at this, and we have a lot of chief of police that are very good about it and want to talk about it and want to refine their process for their safety and for everybody else's. But there's some towns that use this as a way of basically stopping pistol permits in their town.
So there's no one formula that each town follows for a pistol permit background check?
Right. The only formula would be the automatic disqualifications, but the suitability requirements are completely open-ended.
Would someone like you and your organization go for a national standard or a state standard for the background check?
We would like to see the state standard be the same as what our non-resident permit is, which is kind of a funny gotcha in this state. Since non-residents can apply to the state of Connecticut for a pistol permit and then carry in our state, even if they don't live in our state, they apply straight to the DPS, and there is no suitability check as such. I mean, the DPS can certainly run one if they would like to, but they submit to a state and federal background check, and then they get their pistol permit if there's no flags. And we would like to see that implemented for everybody in Connecticut. I think it would save a lot of money, time, and a lot of people would be less harassed by the process.
In terms of beefing up or streamlining background checks, shouldn't that be something included in one of the bills up in the legislature this year?
Absolutely. I think we should be trying to encourage people to go out and get their pistol permit. And this may sound crazy to some people in the regards of, do we want everybody to have a gun? But that's not really the issue. Having a pistol permit means that you've gone through federal and state background checks, and the state now keeps a tab on you when you have that pistol permit and will revoke it if you end up like that. So a pistol permit, taking it out as identification, or if somebody is just questioning your credentials, this is an easy way for you to be able to say, I'm not a criminal.
But we haven't talked about the psychological component of a background check. Is there one?
Well, I can't be 100% sure of how the federal government is using mental issues in their background checking features. I don't believe there's anything like that in the state, only because I have the conviction history database, and we host that on our website for people's use. Again, we're trying to keep people from illegally selling firearms to people, maybe unknowingly, so we provide that tool. But they don't have any provisions in there for mental history. And federally, I know there are some reporting requirements, but I have heard that they're lackluster.
That's very informative. So you're telling me there's no psychological model on the background check?
Not as far as I know, and I think that would be a great topic of discussion for our legislators.
You're listening to Reporter at Large on AM 1220 WQUN. Good morning. I'm your host, John DeAndre, and with me this morning is Richard Burgess, president of Connecticut Carry, Incorporated. We continue our conversation, but first this programming note. Quinnipiac Conversations with Ray Andrewson follows this morning's Reporter at Large. Rich, let's continue our conversation about the pro-gun lobby, your organization, Connecticut Carry, Inc. Newtown was a tragedy. Nobody denies that.
Sure.
But there were a lot of layers to that with regard to the gun and the firing of all of those shots. Could you walk us through a little bit about the gun itself and the ammo and how you get all of that and who gets that?
Well, I'll put the disclaimer on it that since the Newtown tragedy is still being actively investigated, we don't know a whole lot, and we're seeing a lot of conflicting information, and I try not to comment on these things. I mean, even the Aurora, Colorado shootings, I still don't know enough about to really push on this. I think a lot of this is just media hype. However, if we go by what has been reported, what they are reporting is a Bushmaster 223 AR-15 rifle. And, I mean, this is a modern sporting rifle. This is the de facto, the most popular rifle in America right now. And it's not any more deadly than any other rifle. We've had semi-automatic rifles for over 100 years now. Theodore Roosevelt hunted with one, famously. We're not dealing with a rifle that's such a terrible nuisance. These are not automatic weapons. They're not what the military carries. They look like it, but, so does a child's toy that shoots airsoft, pellets. We're not dealing with a disastrous weapon. There's certainly a conversation to be had about the number of rounds in a detachable magazine. However, we need to remember who sets these numbers and where do they come from. I mean, what we commonly hear in Connecticut is 10 rounds. Who would need more than 10 rounds? Well, I can tell you no cop, no military member would ever carry under 10 rounds. So that gives you a pretty good idea. I mean, if we want to say, well, the only reason why somebody would need this many rounds is to slaughter lots of people, I think this is a silly notion because our police don't go around slaughtering lots of people, and our police don't carry a gun to hurt people or to chase criminals down. The primary reason for a police officer to have a firearm on him is to protect himself from the people he's going and talking to, arresting, things like this. So that's the exact same reason I carry a firearm. It's the exact reason why you should carry a firearm. We need guns to protect ourselves, and there's no reason, conceivable, logical reason, why we should be not equipped with the same thing that our police carry.
So was that or wasn't that an assault rifle that was used?
That was not an assault rifle. An assault rifle has a very specific definition, and one of the main characteristics that is in that definition is select fire. And what that means is that there would be a switch on the side that could go from semi-automatic, which is one squeeze of the trigger results in one bullet being fired, to fully automatic or a burst, which would mean that multiple rounds are discharged every time the trigger's pulled.
Okay, so then let's switch gears to actually assault rifles. Since the tragedy in Newtown, several cities and towns have had buyback programs for guns. In some of those collections in New Haven and in Bridgeport have been assault rifles. So where do those rifles come from?
Well, I think this shows a very good example of, first of all, the assault rifles that may or may not have been turned in many cases are not assault rifles. I think they're very much hyped up. They're likely semi-automatic AR-15s that, for whatever reason, I can't imagine why anybody's turning in a likely $1,000 rifle to a $100 gift certificate. But that's their right to do it
because it's illegal.
Well, they're not illegal though. AR-15s are regulated in this state, but they're not illegal. And most of the issues that might make one illegal, the features that could, are easily fixed. So we would be willing to help somebody locate the people that can do that for them. But as far as it goes, the assault rifle that was turned in, it was famously turned in, I believe, in Hartford, if I'm guessing right. That was actually a machine gun, and it may or may not have had a select fire. I don't really know, but it doesn't really matter. They're right. That was an automatic weapon. But if we want to talk about, how does this stuff happen? How do the police respond? Well, the police let that person go and told him to turn it in at an FFL, which I happen to agree with. I don't think that person should have been penalized. However, how can we say that, one person has a flash suppressor, for instance, on their rifle, and that makes them very evil, and then this person has a collapsible stock on their rifle, and that makes it illegal, But this person has a fully automatic weapon that is what everybody thinks an assault rifle or an assault weapon or whatever we want to call it. They think that the things they see on the TV are fully automatic weapons. This person actually had one. Police let them go. So I don't really understand. Again, I don't want to see the laws harshened to crack down on law-abiding people, but at the same time, we can't have this selective enforcement of our laws.
Is it fair to say that some of the buyback is just to get some of the drug dealers' guns off the streets?
Yeah, I think that's probably a misnomer. I think the buybacks, first of all, I hate the term buybacks. The police and the government never own the gun, so I don't really know how you buy back a gun that you never owned. But that's just a nomenclature issue. But the concept that they're buying drug dealers' guns, I don't know of too many drug dealers who would turn in their guns. I mean, it's a very dangerous, business. I certainly would want to carry a gun too if I was in a dangerous business. However, what we're also offering is amnesty for anybody who turns in their guns, which, in the case of the machine gun being turned in, certainly that person shouldn't be penalized. I don't think they knew what they had or, meant to commit any crimes with it. But you're also offering amnesty for any murders that happen. So effectively what these cops are doing is fencing for the criminals and destroying the evidence of their crimes. I think the whole concept needs to be rethought. Certainly there's plenty of dealers in this state that would love to give even more money to people to turn in their guns, but that's called just buying and selling guns.
Where do you think we're going with the possible assault rifle ban on the national level?
On the national level, I'm willing to predict that we don't see much come of this. I think this is a lot to do about nothing. I would imagine there might be some executive orders that make things difficult, but they'll be challenged pretty harshly. Legislative-wise, I don't believe they're going to get it through the House. There might be a detachable magazine, limitation passed, but I think that'll be challenged on its constitutionality. I think people need to remember that the legal landscape has changed drastically since 1994. We have lots of decisions about what common use means among firearms. I can tell you now the assault weapons ban in Connecticut is likely already unconstitutional and will be challenged. We are certainly an organization that plans to do so when we have the resources available to us and we have set up the correct legal foundation. You can't ban things that are in common use. The Supreme Court's already decided that. And in fact, the Supreme Court didn't only decide that AR-15s are in common use, but they also mentioned that M16s, which is what the military does use, are in common use. So we have a pretty wide attack pattern on the laws that we have in this country.
Last week there was a gun show not too far from Newtown. Not only were the local news outlets on top of it, but the national news outlets were on top of it. Is this going to happen every time there's a gun show?
I'm sure it'll die out pretty quickly, but I think this is just another symptom of that hysteria and media sensationalism that's going on. I don't understand what exactly a gun show has to do with the Newtown tragedy, and we're seeing that all over the place. I mean, Waterbury, the police chief there denied a show, and I can't figure out what's going through the logical centers of people's brains when they think that a lawful business or group of businesses getting together has anything to do with Newtown.
Earlier in the program, you mentioned a website. What's that address?
Our address is ctcarry.com. It's CT as in Connecticut and carry.com.
We have a couple minutes left. In the wake of the Newtown tragedy, how does Connecticut Carry, Inc. work with other pro-gun groups, which there are in Connecticut, to try to prevent something like this from happening again? Can you?
Well, I think we need to define terms, so to speak, of there is no solution to what happened in Newtown. This is a massacre created by an evil madman. Now, we can have discussions all day about what mental illnesses he had or anything else and try to identify symptoms like that, but to be fair, we're never going to stop bad people from doing bad things. And we'll never stop bad people from existing. You just can't do that. However, as much as we would like to see it done, I mean, by no means do we think that we should give up on trying to do that. But we also need to put it in perspective and realize that, things like that, there's no simple fix. And legislative fixes are almost always going to hurt good people more than bad people. Bad people don't follow the laws. For instance, in the Newtown tragedy, he committed many, many felonies, including capital murder, before he ever entered that school. So I think we all need to, relax a bit and realize that legislative actions are good in some regards, but that hysterical ones that are reactionary in nature, we always need to have a moratorium before we really think about these things.
So you're saying we should take 2 steps back and a deep breath and say, wait, let's sort all this out?
Sure. I think if most of these politicians that are talking about it right now wanted to be honest about it and open about it and wanted to actually have a real discussion like they're saying, we'd wait until the next legislative session to discuss this. I think they're trying to play on emotions a little bit too much, and I think it's kind of exploitive.
What's your organization's role in the next few weeks and months up at the state capitol?
Well, we'll certainly be organizing people there. We're going to be trying to get our education out to people on how to handle the legislative session, there's written testimony, oral testimony. There's lots of things we can do. There's certainly writing your representatives and letting them know that we're not quiet. We just introduced a system on our website that we hope is going to help us in that pursuit. Basically what it does is it archives legislative emails so people can copy an email address that we have included, and all their legislative emails will be archived. The idea behind that is that we commonly see legislators talk about, we have so many requests for gun control, we have so many people outraged. Well, we're going to show them exactly how many people are outraged at their position. And I don't think we can trust them to give us that information, so we're going to provide that for them.
What do you think is going to happen when the session is over? Do you actually think we're going to have some new gun legislation?
I think there's certainly a strong possibility of it. We're certainly going to do everything we can to fight it. But, these things are dirty tricks usually, and we're seeing that across Illinois in their legislative session. So we're expecting the worst and, preparing for it, but we certainly hope for the best.
And that website address again is?
ctcarry.com.
Richard Burgess, president of Connecticut Carry, Incorporated. Thank you for being my guest on Reporter at Large.
Thank you very much for having us on.
This is John DeAndre. Join us again next Saturday morning for another edition of Reporter at Large.
For America's wounded warriors, coming home can sometimes be a battle in itself. Making the transition back to civilian life or active duty with a traumatic injury can be the challenge of a lifetime. The USO provides every American a way to support our wounded warriors and their families through every phase of their medical treatment and rehabilitation. It's how all of us, as a community, can give something back to our heroes. It's how we can say thank you and assure them that their sacrifice is recognized and appreciated by every one of us. Join us. Visit USO.org to learn how you can make a difference in the lives of our wounded warriors and their families. The USO, until everyone comes home.
AM 1220, WQUN Hamden, another service of Quinnipiac University.